The announcement of slashing 1,800 positions from the New South Wales Public Education Service is a disgrace. Those people work in real jobs providing quality services for the people of New South Wales. All that will mean now is that that work will not disappear, whilst the positions might. That work will now be pushed down to schools and TAFE teachers in our classrooms having to pick up the workload as those 1,800 people are made redundant. These cuts will have a devastating effect on the quality of public provision of education in our state, and we'll be working with community, we'll be working with other unions to campaign to have these cuts reversed, and we'll be holding this government to account in the lead-in to the next New South Wales state election. When you consider the magnitude of these cuts, $1.7 billion over 4 years, one has to remember that currently the New South Wales government spends 22.4% of the state budget on education. If you go back to 1989-90, you'll find that back then the state government spent 28.4% of the budget on education. So we're working against a steady decline in funding for New South Wales public education. And now this comes at a time, of course, when the federal government is finally moving to massively increase investment in our students' education. At a time when it's finally being recognised that we spend lower than the OECD average on education as a nation, we have the Gillard federal Labor government moving to implement the Gonski funding model. This new approach to schools funding holds the prospect that we'll finally see long overdue investment in meeting the needs of students in our public schools. Our concern now, of course, is that if the increased funding from the Gonski model flows through to New South Wales, the O'Farrell government is making moves to rip the money out at the other end. That's a disgrace, and we will be continuing to campaign to oppose these cuts. The Teachers Federation will be working with all other organisations that are affected by these cuts. We'll be working with other unions, with our parents, our students, community members, and of course we'll be relying on fellow employees across New South Wales to understand, respect and support the need for us to stand up for public provision in this state. Whether it's public health, public transport, public education, this government has to be convinced by the voters of New South Wales that we value quality public services for the people. So yes, we will be working with those other unions and organisations.
Will there be a day of action? Will there be strike action?
Well, there'll be action, all right. We need to meet through our usual forums of Executive and State Council. We'll be liaising with Unions New South Wales. We'll be working with other unions and organisations. Organisations like the Parents and Citizens Federation of New South Wales, our state principal organisations, will be building a community alliance to campaign strongly in the months and, if necessary, the years ahead to reverse these cuts.
Terry Medrell, I remember those days, you would remember those days. There were mass protests. Eventually Medrell was rolled. Is that style of campaigning, of having tens of thousands of people behind Parliament, something that you'd be looking at?
The specific strategies are yet to be determined, but clearly we'll be looking to mobilise as many people as we can to rise up against a government that could do this to public services in New South Wales and public education in particular. And I might make a point too in terms of community perception of this issue. 1,800 people losing their jobs. Real workers, real employees doing real work in the New South Wales public service and in public education, in our schools and TAFE colleges in particular. They spend those salaries, they spend their pay in local communities, in suburbs and towns right across this state. That's money in the local economy, it's money in local small business. There will be a flow-on effect of these cuts. And those fellow employees now are going home and telling their families that they won't have employment as a result of these cuts. O'Farrell has to be made to account for the impact of that on our fellow citizens. We're so tired in public education of these claims by government. It's all about government's priorities. And quite frankly, as I've indicated earlier, the statistics tell the story. As a nation, we spend below the OECD average on education across the board. As a state, We spend a declining proportion of our state budget on education provision. When will our governments understand that investing in our children's education is an investment in the future prosperity of this country? We have a skills shortage, so now we see 800 jobs being cut from TAFE, including frontline teaching positions as a result of the labour expense cap. We have to have enough people understand and support a campaign to turn this kind of policy making around. We need a strong, viable public sector in New South Wales to provide quality services for the people. And this idea that you can privatise TAFE, flog off courses, put them out to competitive tender to the lowest bidder and so on, that attack on TAFE provision is proving devastating across the economy. We have a skills shortage at the same time as governments are cutting courses and increasing student fees, creating obstacles, putting obstacles in the way of students enrolling in TAFE courses. How can they justify that? And we don't buy this argument that they're tightened, they're difficult budgetary times. We have a rich and prosperous economy. By world standards, the Australian economy is not in trouble. All we're saying is make education a priority in your government spending program.
Did Barry O'Farrell lie to the people of New South Wales when he promised that there would be no change to education funding models, and what happened?
We've seen the classic before and after election scenario here. Prior to the March 2011 election, the O'Farrell government did not put on the table the kind of changes and attacks and cuts that we're now seeing. And even in the school sector, they've dressed up a cost-cutting agenda. They've dressed it up and called it local schools, local decisions. Well, now the lie has been revealed. They're not devolving more decision-making to the local school level. They're actually devolving the work now of 1,000 people whose jobs have just been axed. That work will go into schools and it will draw our teachers away from providing teaching and learning for students and picking up the work that's currently done by people in the front office, that's currently done by support staff who help us with special needs students and the like. So, of course, this is going to have an impact, and typically, this was not broadcast in election policy before the O'Farrell government was elected. And it will be our task and our responsibility to hold them to account. When Metherell and Griner were mentioned earlier, the last time we had a state coalition government, they set about a similar agenda, cutting the public sector, slashing teaching and support positions in public education in New South Wales. We campaigned for months and years against that attack, and that government was thrown out of office in March 1995 and spent 16 years in opposition. And O'Farrell, the Premier, the Minister for Education and their fellow Liberal and National Party MPs ought to take account of that history. They will be held to account, and we will mobilise the strongest community campaign we can to protect quality service delivery. We will use all available means, be it paid advertising and publicity, be it local community forums, attending parents and citizens meetings in our schools, handing out leaflets in the community, and indeed, if it's necessary, and it's always a last resort in any industry, including public schools and TAFE colleges, if it's necessary, we will look at industrial action as a means of responding to these attacks on the quality of our students' education.
So the government should get ready for a pretty big fight?
Well, we've been here before, as I've indicated, and we'll be pursuing campaigning in the usual way with this government. And I might add, it's been interesting to see the Federal Education Minister, Peter Garrett, come out today also condemning the New South Wales government's actions at a time when the federal Labor government, to its credit, is looking to implement the Gonski funding model, putting additional much-needed funding into our public schools across the nation. We see a state government ripping funding out to this magnitude. So clearly the political reality will be borne by Liberal and National Party MPs across this state as a result of these actions.
So what's the next step you're taking, and when are you taking it?
We'll be considering the magnitude and impact of these cuts at our state executive meeting next Tuesday. We'll be liaising with Unions New South Wales and our fellow unions on this matter, and we'll be determining collectively the kind of action that we believe is necessary to turn these cuts around and protect public education for our students.
So if the money isn't there, should it come from elsewhere, the health budget, the police budget?
Yet again, any government determines its priorities. Maybe it is about time that we had a debate in this country about the taxation revenue that a state or federal government raises. Maybe we have to have people understand that if we want and need high quality public education, high quality public health care, high quality public transport systems for the people of this country, maybe we have to see a sea change in the way people perceive government services, i.e. they cost. And maybe we do need a debate about the level of taxation revenue that federal and state governments raise, because I believe that most voting Australians would support a taxation base being raised by government if indeed it was translated into high quality public services for the people. We used to be a nation like that once. We've seen decades now of governments cutting away at public provision, and you need look no further than TAFE. TAFE has been decimated by state and federal government funding policies over years, to the point now where in states like Victoria, they're going to be struggling to keep alive a TAFE system. And here in New South Wales, from this announcement, the federal government's heading in the same direction. We have to see education as an investment, and if that means Australian voters have to accept that it requires taxation revenue to pay for it, then so be it. We're talking about the overall quality of public provision, so no student, no child, no citizen misses out on the healthcare, the education, the public services they deserve in a rich and prosperous nation like Australia. If there are no further questions, thank you very much. Obviously, we will be following through on this campaign, and there'll be more to follow. Thanks for your interest today.